שלום לכולם.
התודות, the long thanks that Nadia gave made us forget two important thanks. Thank you to Judith Katzova and Nadia Matar for organizing this important evening. And I must admit that when Nadia and Judith called me, I said that the right place to begin a conference like this is in the Knesset. And I think that I'm quite convinced that the right place is indeed in Hebron, the first Jewish city, right next to Machpela, where we indeed call to implement Jewish sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. I once heard that we should never use the word annex, because you annex land that does not belong to you, and we want to, this is our land, and so we should use the term to impose sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. And we'll call for that at this conference. And although we are optimists and we are talking about implementing sovereignty, we have to ask a question. If it's so clear and obvious and self-evident and natural, why hasn't it happened yet? Why hasn't it happened yet? And I'll ask an even bigger question at that. How is it possible that for 40 years the Israeli right has never taken any action to implement sovereignty over Judea and Samaria, although Begin did do so for the Golan Heights, and we know that East Jerusalem was annexed in the past, as was the Golan Heights. And how is it possible that in recent years we see that all the right-wing leaders that reached the Prime Minister's office under that terrible statement of what you see from there, you don't see from here, not only did they not change any direction, but ultimately we are left with a pretty used second-hand slogan that was a slogan of the left from back in 1967, 2 states for 2 nations. How did we reach this absurd situation? So the easiest thing to say is that our leaders don't have any backbone. They're unable to contend with the pressure from the world. But I think that would make things too easy for us. And just in order to understand why we have not annexed Judea and Samaria, I'll conduct a short survey here. Raise your hands. How many of you are in favor of implementing sovereignty? Raise your hands. Everyone. Excellent. That's wonderful. Tomorrow you become the prime ministers and you will annex. How many of you are in favor of giving citizenship to the Arabs living in Judea and Samaria? I see 5 hands go up. 6. I think there are about 300 people in this room. This disparity between annexation and citizenship is the gap where the state of Israel has been for the past 40 years when it didn't annex Judea and Samaria. That is the entire story in a nutshell. As Golda Meir said, the dowry is wonderful after 67, but what do you do with the bride? That is, we really liked the dowry that we got from the war, the lands, the areas of Judea and Samaria, but what do we do with the bride? That's the big question. Now, in order to really understand this story, we need to take one question on head on. It's clear that the land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people. Nobody here needs to be convinced of that. And I think most left-wing people agree that the land of Israel belongs to the land of Israel. Certain those who consider themselves the Israeli opposition today, nobody disagrees with that point. But we need to understand that after many long years in which we became accustomed to live in this interim situation where there is a question mark hanging over Judea and Samaria despite all the construction and the growth, and we are 300,000 people living there now, it is completely clear that the path to contending with the question of imposing sovereignty goes through the question of what to do with the Arab population. And it appears that no one has come up with a solution he was willing to unite the right-wing camp around over all the years. We've heard many solutions over the years. From Jordan is Palestine, but for that solution you need a Jordanian partner that would be willing to take in those people. And we've heard solutions that talk about a kind of confederation with Jordan and Egypt via Gaza, and various solutions that spoke about autonomy, a solution that the Likud espoused for many years. But then we reached the conclusion, as the Prime Minister said in no uncertain terms, what can you do? The world won't accept Jewish sovereignty. The Jew does not accept Jewish settlement in Judea and Samaria. And we are fighting here not over our strength vis-a-vis the world, but before we set out on a campaign with the world, we first need to be united among ourselves around the working assumption that the current status quo is dangerous to the state of Israel, that it's not good for us. For many years, the right deluded itself that we would bring another 1,000 Jews, another settlement, and everything would be fine. And they'll get used to the idea eventually. So, okay, we have brought 1/3 Jews to Judea and Samaria, but we have not succeeded in this idea of creating a fact on the ground. And so it appears to me that today, as we march towards September, as we march towards a unilateral action on the part of the Palestinians, which we don't know will happen or not, but that is the international discourse. That is our time, as far as historical momentum is concerned, is to do what we should have done 40 years ago, which is it a shame that we haven't done all these years, but this is the time to impose Israeli sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. Because as long as we continue to send this message, it is difficult to bring Jews who will agree to live in these places which are so accessible, so much in the center of the country. But as long as we continue to place obstacles in the way of construction, and I'm talking on behalf of a government with everything that happened with the building freeze, we have to restore our civil control over Judea and Samaria. We have to restore to ourselves the ability to build there as much as we want based on the needs of the state of Israel. And today we know more than ever how great Israel's needs are when we see the housing crisis going on now. And the most basic place we need to build is in Judea and Samaria. That's where it all should start. I would like to talk about the big question I have posed to you. What do we do with the Arab population? I deliberately am not calling it the demographic question, because I think far more serious than the demographic is the problem between us and Israeli Arabs. Just last week, my colleague MK Arya Eldad, we had Hanan Zouabi before the Ethics Committee in the Knesset, and we know the extent to which the Arab population represents a view that denies the legitimacy of the state of Israel and is unwilling to live in such a state. And so if we give citizenship to 1.5 million or 2 million Arabs, depends on how you count them, this may be dangerous for the state of Israel. And I think that just as the settlements were not built in one stage, were not built overnight, this also has to be done in stages. And the first thing has to be the position of sovereignty over Area C, where all the Jewish communities, where this enormous endeavor of the Jewish communities of Judea and Samaria are located. In Area C, there are only 100,000 Palestinians. To contain 100,000 Palestinians is something that the state of Israel can indeed live with and contend with. And this can be a very important experiment for this imposition of sovereignty, because we will find ourselves facing a situation where we will no longer be on the defensive. We will have to put facts on the ground, and we will begin with imposing sovereignty over all the Jewish communities that exist together, not according to settlement blocks, but according to those famous areas where Israel has control, according to the Oslo agreements, which would have been better if they never were born. But we should know how to exploit the new reality as best we can. The important and most significant step is how to relate to the Arab population. In order to understand that, we have to go back to the book of Joshua. When Joshua conquered the land of Israel, he gave the local residents three options, and Maimonides says this very well. He said to those who want to make peace with us will make peace with us. Those who want to fight will fight, and those who want to flee will flee. Those are the three options that Joshua posed to them. Those are the three options we have to pose to the Palestinians. Those who want to make peace will make peace. Those who want to live under Israeli sovereignty, including responsibilities and duties. We live in an absurd situation where the Israeli Arabs do not have equal duties. They do not serve in any kind of national service. We must require the Arab population to serve in a national service. That must be part of this package deal. The second and very significant point is that the legal framework into which this idea must be placed. I would like to mention a very important figure who is the founding father of this whole idea. Two people, actually. One is Uri Elitzur. Uri Elitzur of Ofra was the first courageous person who said, we must take this idea of imposing sovereignty over Judea and Samaria, even at the cost of citizenship, because otherwise we will lose Judea and Samaria. And this courageous step made people like me in the political right to say that is an option that needs to be considered, that cannot be dismissed out of hand. And the second individual who should be mentioned is someone to whom we will send wishes of a speedy recovery from here, Hanan Porat, who is a wonderful and very dear individual. And when I spoke to him, I think his name, yes, Rabbi Hanan Porat. And when I met with him, he said that it is very important that we understand that a situation in which we give citizenship to all the entire population, most of whom are involved in a state of conflict with us, is an impossible situation. And therefore, as I see it, we must bear in mind that we must give the Arabs three options. One is the option of living as residents in the state of Israel. So you'll say to me, where is there such a thing in the world that people are residents in the country in which they were born? Okay, there are many things in Israel that are unique. For example, our ability to live in a reality in which citizens from our country act intensively against the government, and we see their representatives in the Knesset. So this is indeed a bizarre thing that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. And it is completely clear when you have a situation where an entire population says they are in favor of destroying the state of Israel, they cannot be given, they cannot be naturalized all at once. Those who are not willing to accept a Jewish state cannot be a citizen with full political rights, and therefore this process of naturalization of citizenship is a gradual one, and we should take this area of the country, which is a very significant one as far as we are concerned, but very negligible as far as its Palestinian population, as a test case. Those who wish to make peace will make peace. Those who wish to flee will flee. Anyone who wants to emigrate and live and be a citizen of any of the neighboring countries is welcome to do so. He will certainly not receive more rights in those countries around us. And those who want to fight us will fight. Ultimately, many of us understand that the war, the fundamental war remains, because it's not over 1967, it's over 1948, it's over the very existence of the state of Israel. And when that is the state, I cannot but tell you that this is a solution that will prevent us from fighting. It is a solution that will talk mainly about our rights, that will return us to the point that Israel has forgotten in recent years. What is the best thing for the Jews? We're always thinking about what's best for the world. Let's talk about what's best for us, for the Jews. And it's not good for the Jews to be constantly in a situation where we send a message that we are willing to partition the land with all kinds of tactics. This weakens us. This ultimately creates delegitimization of the entire settlement enterprise, because if we are willing to divide up the land, how can we complain about any other country that wants to do so? This was always the approach since we returned here in the renewed return to Zion. This was the approach, that there should be two nation states here. And so indeed the time has come to start this major public campaign that needs to begin in the Knesset first. A number of things about the political process. When I started to talk about this in the Knesset, I held a large conference about the alternative to the two-state solution. I saw that I was pretty much alone. There were very few people who were willing to talk about imposing Israeli law, certainly not in the Likud. I'm talking about in the coalition. I don't want any of my colleagues in the National Union who are of course willing to annex not only Judea and Samaria but Transjordan as well, I think, at least most of them. So I think as far as the representation in the coalition is concerned, there was hardly a voice that was willing to agree with that. But as we proceeded, as we continued, as the idea developed, as we saw that we could not reach any kind of settlement with the Palestinians, I started to hear more and more ministers in the Likud talking about this as a possibility. We heard Minister Moshe Kachlon and Israel Katz and Gilad Erdan. We heard a number of senior ministers talking about this idea. And within the coalition, of course, there was the chairman of the coalition who is signed to this bill, Miri Regev, Yariv Levin. And I want to say to you that today there are a number of bills that we know that we can bring forward that are right now at the doorstep of the government to impose sovereignty. And if you ask me, when we saw the public attack, large-scale attack on two important moves that I don't think should be taken lightly, but ultimately they are declarative in nature. They send a message which is more symbolic than substantial, because I think that the best way to deal with leftist organizations that receive foreign funding is by means of legislation that would prohibit foreign funding, because parliamentary committees are a relatively weak instrument compared to legislation that would give teeth to this idea of limiting foreign funding as there is in the United States. And I proposed a bill of this nature, and sadly the government did not support it, but we will continue to fight for that legislation. But this is a real opportunity to create public pressure. The anti-boycott law and the investigation law, this is the first stage in a country that wants the right to rule, because that is what the people have chosen. There's nothing more important for the right wing than to impose sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. This is the people saying that we do not want to withdraw from these areas. It is almost 6 years now since Gush Katif. We do not want to see any more of these sites. We want sovereignty. We can no longer live in a situation in which the citizens of Judea and Samaria are second-class citizens who need 5 signatures from the Minister of Defense or some department in the Prime Minister's office to build a porch in their house or to build an apartment. That is not logical. This is something we must fight, and this is something that is possible politically only if there is a large popular movement that will call upon the government to impose sovereignty in Judea and Samaria, and to counter all the pressure from the media that will say that it's impossible, it's bizarre, it doesn't make sense. But 300,000 Jews who declare sovereignty in an area of hostile Arabs is no less logical than 7 million Jews in this area saying we want sovereignty, we want independence, and show us that it's possible and give us the strength to do this. And I hope that from here, from this conference, this will be only the beginning. Thank you. You have exactly 5 minutes left for questions. So we'll take 1 or 2 questions. We have a stopwatch here, as I said in the beginning. Before I take questions, just one more comment. A very important point on the matter of demographics. Throughout the world, there are 6 million Jews, depending how you count, between 6 and 9 million, depending on who you decide is a Jew. But there is a large Jewish diaspora. The state of Israel has almost given up on the idea of bringing another million Jews to the state of Israel. I'm not talking about bringing 6 million Jews, but bringing another 1 million Jews, and I believe that we won't need to contend with issues that are today the scariest issues. My dear friend Yarom Ettinger, I'm sure, will talk about the whole matter of demographics. There is a real opportunity for the state of Israel to act on the encouragement of Aliyah. We have all these young people who come here in the context of Taglit. We need to have continuing programs that will leave these young people who are students so that they can live here and build their homes here. And I hope that they come to Judea and Samaria so that we can strengthen the Jewish community there. Thank you very much. We'll take